Hello, hello.
Hello,
We
hello.
are just about to start shortly. So please be with us. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. I'm Professor Lekha here. We can.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm Alexey Barabashev. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
discussion of the 6th International Conference on BRICS Development and Governance on the topic Digitalization and Good Governance. To gain further insights of the topic, I would now request the distinguished panelists and the moderator to join us. Professor Nidhi Sharma and Sri Santosh Mishra, I request you to please welcome on the stage.
We would now like to take the privilege of introducing our esteemed panelists. I'm honored to introduce our first panelist, Sri Santosh Mishra from PwC. Mr. Mishra is a highly respected professional with extensive experience in implementing broker back office solutions. His expertise spans in retail and institutional brokers, investment managers, and clients across the globe. He also brings a proven track record in client onboarding, data mitigation, and possesses a deep understanding of trade life cycle, broker deal business, custodial solution business, and Selenium. It is with great pleasure that we have Sri Santosh Mishra with us today. Let's extend a warm welcome as he shares his insights on the evolving landscape of public administration in India. Sir, welcome to the first panel discussion of the day.
Our second panelist of the day is Professor Nidhi Sharma. Currently working as a faculty member at IIM Raipur, Professor Nidhi has a specialization in public finance and economics with a distinguished academic background from Lucknow University and IIM Ahmedabad and more than 2 decades of experience serving in various technical, administrative, and training related responsibilities. She has also served in the Indian Revenue Service from 2000 to 2023, where her areas of work were public policy and capacity building. As a certified leadership trainer by Center of Creative Leadership, USA, she has facilitated several leadership workshops for induction level training of fresh entrants to civil services as well as mid-career training programs of the IAS officers. She has also played a pivotal role as a faculty member at Labasna, Missouri, where she trained over 2,000 IAS officers and excels in facilitating leadership workshops and modules on negotiation strategies and public-private partnership. Ma'am, we are honored to have you here.
Our third panelist, Professor Alexei G. Barbashev from National Research University, Russia, is a distinguished scholar and educator at the Higher School of Economics. With a doctorate in philosophy of science and technology from Moscow State Teaching Training University, his career has been marked by significant contributions to the field. Professor Barbashev's research focuses on the relationship between science, technology, and society, exploring ethical considerations, technological implications, and the historical evolution of the scientific thought. Committed to education, he shares his expertise through teaching and mentorship, shaping the future of philosophical thinking. Sir, we're truly honored to have you here with us today.
Thank you.
Our next panelist is Dr. Haoqi Xian, an assistant professor at Fudan University's Institute of Global Public Policy. Dr. Xian is a leading expert in energy and environmental governance, serving as the assistant director at both the MOE Laboratory for National Development and Intelligent Governance and the Shanghai Institute for Energy and Carbon Neutrality Strategy. He plays a pivotal role in shaping future policies. With over a decade of experience in computable general equilibrium modeling and renowned publications in top journals, including Nature Sustainability, Dr. Xian stands at the forefront of research, earning accolades in the field of scientific research. Sir, welcome to the discussion.
Our fifth panelist is Dr. Shireen Midon from London School of Economics and Political Science, UK. A renowned academic in management, she specializes in technology, development, and governance. As a professor at LSE, her interdisciplinary work in sociology, economics, and political science has shaped our understanding of technology's impact, especially in developing nations. Dr. Madon's insightful analysis and extensive publication record demonstrates her significant contributions to the field. Known for her dynamic speaking style, she's a sought after speaker globally. We are privileged to have Dr. Madon, and her insights are sure to stimulate thought provoking discussions on technology's role in development and governance. Ma'am, we welcome you to the discussion.
Thank you.
Now, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Professor Lekha Chakrabarti. Professor Chakrabarti is a renowned economist and pioneer in institutionalizing gender budgeting in India. As a professor at NIPFP and a research affiliate at the Levi Economics Institute of Bard College, she specializes in macroeconomics of public finance, fiscal federalism, climate financing, and gender budgeting. With extensive global experience, including stints with the IMF, ILO, World Bank, and more, her work spans 8 countries. Professor Chakrabarti is the author of impactful books, including Fiscal Policy for Sustainable Development in Asia Pacific, Gender Budgeting in India. She has received numerous awards and is a sought after columnist featured in various prominent publications and media outlets. Ma'am, we are honored to have you here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
I would now request Professor Jitesh A. to welcome our panelists with a bouquet. Shri Santosh Mishra. Professor Nidhi Sharma.
I now request the moderator, Professor Chakrabarti, to please take the panel discussion ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Warm good morning, students, and my special thanks to Professor Ram, the director of IIM Raipur, for having me, and Professor Asha Purna. She's my student, and I am extremely happy and honored to see her, doing this brilliant BRICS conference at IIM. It's my double happiness to be on board with her for this conference and to moderate the first technical session. And thank you. I have listened to the eminent panelists with me today to discuss about the digital or the digitization and the good governance, the first technical session for the conference. Of course, it's an important topic. We have to think about when we think in terms of the geopolitical bloc and when we think in terms of the multilateral policy framework. And of course, this BRICS Digital Economy Report of 2022, that's a starting point of thinking this, in deep about the prospects and the challenges and the risk it put forward. Of course, it is one of the fastest and the smartest way to develop, because we have seen when the world stopped, only the digitization and the digital infrastructure, which has helped us to be together. But at the same time, it is posing a lot of challenges in terms of the data privacy and also in terms of the, human rights. So in this, panel, I urge my co-panelists to explore these aspects. And I would love to call upon Dr. Santosh Mishra for his opening remarks about the topic digitization and good governance. Over to you, Dr. Santosh Mishra.
Thank you, Professor Chakrabarti. And thank you, IIM Raipur, for having me. And thank you, DARPG, for nominating me for this. It's a privilege. And again, just like you said, Dr. Chakrabarti, your student is the organizer. We two batchmates are on the dais. So Nidhi is a dear friend and a batchmate of 21 years. She took VRS last year. I took VRS 2 years earlier. We both are civil servants and have a long association. So pleasure, and of course, Prem, Dr. Prem Singh is a colleague from the IAS as well, and our batchmate. So it's a privilege. My of the entire 21 years of my public service, and now, of course, I'm with the PwC looking after digital transformation, especially looking at transformation in public sector and governments and delivery of public service delivery using emerging technologies such as AI and blockchain, and that's the area I work in. An entire 21 years, I plus this 3 years, I think one thing which has stood out very, very clearly is for countries in BRICS, and we have similar or same set of problems. And during the tea break, I was talking to Professor Tapscott and Professor Jose, and they were pointing out similar issues of inclusion, similar issues of efficient delivery, similar issues of information asymmetry in government, similar issue of how do you improve access to citizen services, and a solution which is built in India. And there are a lot of bright solutions which have been built over the years. Some of them are very, very easily transportable to other BRICS context, and I think it will be a great outcome of this. I think one of the key outcomes, as Professor Chakravarti was mentioning in our opening remarks, is to explore these areas and come together with a possible solution, which areas of cooperation and solution which can be which have been built, tried, and tested in countries, say in China, or say in South Africa or India, and then how do you contextualize it to one of the member countries of BRICS again. As Srinivas sir was Secretary DARPG, when he was giving his keynote address, he was saying, India has built this interesting trinity called JAM, which is Jan Dhan, which is essentially a bank account, Aadhaar, which is unique digital ID, and a mobile phone. And all three are linked together to deliver some of the most fascinating services in the world. Almost $1 trillion worth of transaction happen in a year on UPI rails. So UPI is Unified Payment Infrastructure, one of its kind in the world. And I think there were a lot of apprehensions. How will small people use it? How will shopkeepers use it? And today in India, if you don't have UPI, if you don't have a smartphone-enabled payment system with you, you will be called, you will have a very difficult time navigating the country. Everything you do, every small payment to a large payment you make, it is possible to do it on a UPI enabled infrastructure. You have world's largest digital ID program, 1.3 billion people having unique digital ID, along with their biometric, which is in terms of thumb imprint as well as retina scan available. And look at the power of transformation. I think the entire distribution of subsidy in this country, the amount of saving which has happened because we could eliminate the ghost entries, we could eliminate people who were not eligible for services and bring in people who actually, so it's about excluding the right people. Today morning in the newspaper, I was reading when they started doing, so during this COVID, there is a program which Government of India launched to support farmers. And when they started doing Aadhaar-based, digital ID-based verification, almost 7 to 8% beneficiaries turned out to be not eligible. Almost 1.5 crore, that is 150 million people, 15 million beneficiaries were found ineligible. And that's the saving which this digital innovation brings in. There's a massive focus of Government of India. I, as PwC, we assist them on multiple programs. And one of the major programs which Government of India is running is called National Program on Artificial Intelligence. And I was happy in the morning when I was listening to Professor Chakraborty. Kindly just let me know if I need to stop and hand it over. And so I don't want to overshoot, but I'll maybe take another minute if that is okay with you.
Sure. That's fine. Yeah.
So just, and then I'll close, and then we'll take it up in subsequent thread. So the National Program on AI, and this morning there was a lot of discussion on AI, and there was discussion on, and I think Professor Chakraborty also referred to digital privacy. And luckily, we have this DPDP Act, Digital Privacy and Data Protection Act, which actually mandates and fairly strongly it provides a recourse to if there's some violation. Every fiduciary, data fiduciary, has obligation to follow these acts, follow this act, and follow the regulations which are prescribed. So this National Program on AI is actually attempting to create. I was talking to Professor Tapscott this morning, and I was saying that my firm belief is that keyboard is a barrier. So while it was good to transfer good to go from a manual method of service delivery to an online method of service delivery, it was a great transition. But now it is time to take the revolution 2.0, or you will industry, I mean, it is, or 4.0 or 5.0, whatever we want to call, or 6.0. There's 6G coming now. So whatever you number 0.0 you want to call it, but it's time to move ahead and remove that keyboard as a barrier. So between an electronic system and humans, there is a barrier called keyboard, and I think it's time to remove that. And that's what is being, and it's very fascinating to see that it's being supported under National Program on AI, which is promoting and building a platform called Bhashini, which will enable in all Indian languages, you will be able to translate between them. You will be able to do speech to text, text to speech, and speech will be your interaction mechanism for public service delivery. And I think that will be a next level of inclusion which will happen. So while you moved from manual to online and made things inclusion, I mean, so that was a big transparency move. A lot of inclusion happened because people who otherwise didn't have access to those physical forms, could not fill up a particular benefit or service, now could actually, anyone who had access to internet could do it. But the challenge is not everyone has access to internet. In India, thankfully, we have almost 100% coverage or 98% mobile coverage, which is great. But still, having access to mobile is not necessarily having access to online services, because there are still barriers of digital literacy, which is a big threat. And I think this is very relevant to all the BRICS nations. Digital divide is real and it is existing. And there is a need for tools like Bhashini, which can actually bring that speech facilitation between human and machine. And I think when that happens, that will be the next level of public service delivery, which I would like to at this point highlight. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Santosh, for highlighting that aspects of inclusion efficiency and also to deal with that information asymmetry. And of course, as you mentioned, it has done a wonderful job in terms of the digital infrastructure in public finance, and also in enhancing the financial inclusion, and also to provide the targeted cash transfers. Of course, and before I turn to Dr. Shirin, Dr. Shian, and Professor Alexa, I would love to add to the point of the India specificities from Professor Nidhi, about the state capacity and her experiences and the country-specific points. And Professor Nidhi, you can take another 4-5 minutes to add upon to the India specificities, and also, of course, a little bit of the multilateral structure and cross-country, if you can. Over to you.
Thank you, Professor Chakravarti. So I think I will leave the what and the how to the tech experts. What I would like to focus on is on the why, and I will come at it from a public practitioner lens as well as a consumer user lens, aware citizen who is interested in the public policy space and how this can positively impact my interactions with the government or hamper it. So focusing on the telos or why we are into this, I would advance to you the hypothesis that human beings are fallible. We have biases. We have cognitive limits on processing data. We have judgments. And we bring these with us whenever we are stepping into the space of public service provisioning or even public policy roles. We bring these infirmities with us. And these infirmities have been well documented in various studies. A very interesting example, if some of you would have seen, is this study on American judges, where it was found that for the same crimes, as economists would love to call it ceteris paribus, they awarded harsher judgments to people before lunch, when they were presumably hypoglycemic, or to colored communities. So these are biases playing in, and this is all bona fide. Now, if to this mix you add the malafide or corrupt intent or the intent to harm, the potential to distort the governance measures or the public service being delivered was that much more. It was to address these infirmities that we thought digitalization would present an answer. Digitalization would, it would be more powerful, more data. It'll be more knowledgeable. It'll be able to process that data. So it'll be having more knowledge, that is more data, more power, that means power to process it, and also more reach. So there are people far-flung places where physical offices cannot reach, but probably this will reach. So it will be a little more powerful, a little more knowledgeable, a little more reaching out, closer to God, in whose name we have governed in this part of the country for a long time, whether we call it Raj Dharm or Sushasan or any such thing, right? So it was presumed that digitalization would take you closer to this. It'll address some of the biases and therefore bring the malafide as well as the bona fide errors which we as human beings bring to delivery of governance services. Now, that is the reason why this was brought in. And this is important to understand because as we go ahead, in India, probably we have already achieved the low-hanging fruits of digitalization, by which I would mean, if you look at a 2x2 matrix, at the central government, easier reforms. Now, if you go to sub-national governance or more complex reforms, you will find far bigger challenges, which I will not be talking about right now, but they are going to come. The interesting part is, as a public administration practitioner, I have been dealing with digitalization for over a decade now. We started with simple measures in 2010, I remember, and now it is 2023. We have been using this. Interestingly, what stands out for me is some of the challenges have remained the same, despite the progress made in technology and so many other things, whereas some new challenges have emerged. And if we are to move to subnational and more complex digitalizations, and I'm not even talking about AI, I'm just talking about your plain vanilla digitalization of services, right? So we are going to have to address some of these practical challenges before we can say that we have fruitfully delivered these services meaningfully across all spectrum of people. And the challenges that I foresee are the following. And this is also interestingly, there's been a Deloitte study recently done on the digitalization in income tax department. And they have also pointed out this is one of the biggest two challenges, and that is people problems. So whatever you do, people are going to be there. I remember as a young manager in 2010, as a young public manager, when we were moving to, let us say, new technology, we were doing the first version of the e-office which had come in. A lot of your staff will come up and say, oh no, I can't type, or I am not familiar with technology, and they would seek transfers out, right? So that challenges were there right then. Even now, even today, some of these people challenges remain where, the providers of services have hesitation about learning new tech, as well as about loss of potential loss of jobs. Whereas the consumer of services are sometimes not aware of benefits, or they feel they need an intermediary to access these services. And here I'm talking about, let's say, e-filing, something which was very popular. So these people problems, I see that over a decade, they have still remained. A little bit of nature has changed, and it has been verified by this study also. I'm sure there are many more studies which can find this out. So this is an issue which we need to address. And this is where I think why we are digitizing needs to be made much more deeply understood to the providers of service as well as the consumers of these services. The second issue, which I see again as a public servant, erstwhile public servant, is business process redesign. I would say public service process redesign. We impose digitalization on the existing processes. And what that leads to is, if you're saying digital technology is so much powerful, it has so much data, let the data speak to each other. So for example, a lot of businesses would say that you collect my data by Ministry of Corporate Affairs, the Central Board of Indirect Taxes also collects it, and CBDT also collects it. Why don't you let all these data speak to each other and make filing simpler for me? Because then it makes sense for me as a consumer of services to be onboarded to increase digitalization, to more complex digitalization. Simply, TDS, TCS services. A story that I will just narrate is, I was in Pune recently, and I was, we were having this with some HPCL senior officers, and one of them came up to me and said, you know what, even if you're retired, a revenue service officer is always pestered with these kinds of things. He said, I've not received my refunds. And he was saying, do you know someone, can you put in a word? I said, everything is digital, I can't do anything. However, I would like to advise you, please go to this annual information statement and check. There is some income of yours which is known to the department on which you have not paid tax, and that is why you are not getting your refund. Why don't you go and do this? And lo and behold, 2 days later, he came and he says, you have complained about me to the department. I said, that is not physically possible. It is just that the department already had this data, but it was not made available to you when you were filing your returns. A notice came to him later saying that here is this data. So this is an example of what I'm saying, business process redesign. If we have this data, let us present it at the time of filing returns that, look, here is all this which is there for you. And people would like to simply file the returns and be done with that. So this is just an illustration from the department. There are several such stories across departments, I'm sure, which can be addressed. The third and the last point that I would like to make is, with more power comes far more responsibility. If something is so powerful, then the potential for things to go wrong is also that much more dangerous. I don't know how many of you have read about this. It's also a documentary now, this UK post office scam, where a small twist in the software presented it as if a number of postmasters had embezzled funds from the account. They were prosecuted, they were pursued, a lot of them committed suicide, but there was someone who kept pursuing. The Prime Minister of UK has very recently apologized about the hurt that it caused, but that hurt has been caused. Or closer home, let's say, I don't know how many of you are following the newspapers, but Employees Provident Fund Organization is something which is a trustee of all the retirement funds of the staff in India. There was a recent, a headline, it made the headline, a gentleman went and committed suicide in the EPFO Kerala office. The reason was because he was being asked for a document, incidentally, which came out later, was a 12th pass certificate or some such thing, right? So we read more about this. What has happened is, in the process of digitization, the rejection rates of applications have gone up from, let's say, 12, I think it was approximately 12 to 33% today. So digitization of these processes also brings its own challenges, and it can sometimes wreak havoc on the life of a person for whom it really matters. An individual is just a data point for the system, but it is the whole life for that citizen, and more such stories might make people far more wary of stepping onto the digitization bandwagon. So going forward, and especially when we are stepping into the AI/ML era of digitalization, maybe we need to address these three challenges a little more, which is the people challenges, redesigning business processes to make it simpler, and being wary of how we put in checks and balances to ensure that these kinds of stories are reduced to the minimum possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Nidhi, for highlighting fiercely those three aspects. And of course, on one side, it increases the transparency and made the system simple and efficient. But as you pointed out, eliminating that need for in-person communication, how it can affect, and what are the humanitarian aspects of it. And thank you so much for highlighting, both aspects. And it was very balanced, and I enjoyed it. Now we are turning to the Russian example. Professor Alexa, it's morning for you, I know. And Professor Ivan is also there. I think he's going to translate your points for us. And welcome on board, and over to you for hearing about the Russia-specific experiences about the state capacity and the other issues. Over to you.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor for me to participate in this BRICS symposium, and thank you for inviting me to explain the situation in Russia and our vision of digitalization and good governance process. I will use the examples of Russia. First of all, I would like to say that 20 years ago, before, it was impossible to imagine this challenge as digitalization of governance right now. But last time, we in Russia have a lot of examples of such digitalization. Enormous quality of different data and reshaping the services using this digital apparat. And during the COVID, it was spreading of distance services. And without digital capacities of government, it was impossible to organize these digital services. And right now, we cannot move back and to use the old system of decision-making because people are quite very interesting sometimes to work distantly, to use some services in unified centers of services when you come to the window and apply for some service, and after this everything will be done without you using the digital services, and you just came 2 or 3 days later and received the results of these services without any additional attempts, additional efforts from your side. I think that we move very slowly to the direction of artificial intelligent governance. This is a phenomenon when the decisions produced based on data. This is an evidence-based policy, and after this, using of indexes and indicators and indicative analytics for decision making. And after this, to find the corridor of risks. And after this, automatical decision making. I don't know how it will be in the future, but I suppose that maybe 10 or 15 years later, the situation with governance will be rather different than it is now, because a lot of decision will be produced without participation of people, without participation of men, by the special artificial intelligence or systems. And this is a great problem from my point of view, because if to speak about good governance, about participation of different non-government organizations, different actors, they interested in the decisions in their favor, but not in objective decision based on the data analysis. Some actors are more powerful, some actors less powerful, and more powerful actors would like to have a great influence on decision making. For example, like contractors of the roads, who are sometimes in clash with citizens who don't like the roads in the area because they cut the recreation places, and make their people their life much more difficult. We have situations with influence of data analysis on some decisions not in favor of the people. So good governance, good governance or new public governance, if to speak in the recent terms, like co-participation, cooperation, and co-production, it's sometimes in contradiction with decision making based on the data analysis, because data it's pushed to another direction. We can say now in Russia this situation very often. For example, when we have a program, and program more than half of the budget of Russia right now is in supporting of some programs of development, the targeted programs. And evaluation of this implementation of the program, of the effectiveness, of course, it's made only using the data analysis. A lot of criteria, and each criteria shows is it good result of this program or not good result of the program. And the data is sometimes very far from just to ask the people what they think about the result of the program. As a result, people sometimes are not happy, but data shows that the people should be happy and the program is very effective. That's why at the moment we have some contradiction in Russia between the data analysis and artificial intelligence governance based on indicative approach. And from other sides, good governance, which based on participation of social actors and the influence of decision making. I don't know how it will be in future, but I think that in BRICS countries we have the same challenge that digitalization is change rapidly the fabric of the governance and administrative procedures, not only in services, but in internal process inside the government, because a lot of process in state apparat, in bureaucracy, also digitalized right now in Russia. And for example, we have a situation with evaluation of practices of regions of Russia. We have a competition of the best practices among the regions of Russia. Every year, over 200 best practices evaluated by Ministry of Labor and an expert group of Ministry of Labor. I'm one of the members of this expert group. And most of the practice of the this regional governments are connected with the digitalization, not only services, but of all activity of civil servants. And this is a challenge. I hope that in future we can find some universal methodics of digitalization and governance using the digital, the data and methods of operation of this data. But this is a really main trend of the development of our countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Excellent, Professor Alexa. And, these are the limitations of going empirical on one side. And also we need to incorporate the perceptions of people by people. So how to, maneuver through going empirical as well as, taking the stakeholders' perspective and getting into the qualitative aspects. And these are measurement issues we economists also face, like on one side, the indicators are process related. On the other side, the indicators are related to outcome and product based. And this tug of war exists for the economist as well. And we need to find, we call in economics as a Q-squared approach, that we try to incorporate the qualitative and quantitative aspects together to sort out these issues. But there are limitations in going empirical. that point is very well taken when it comes to the state capacity and when we want to integrate the concerns of the non-governmental, much more wider world, incorporating the perspectives of the civil society and the academia as well. Thank you so much for highlighting that. Now we turn to, the experiences by China, the China specific experiences by Professor Xian. Over to you to speak about, of course, the scope for a multilateral and across country, cooperation models, as well as the digitization aspects related to the national and the subnational levels of governance in your country. Over to you. Dr. Xian? Dr. Xian is not online. We lost him. Is he frozen? In China, it's, I think, around 2 p.m. It's afternoon. Any technical issues? Yeah? Okay. While Dr. Xian's sorting out his issues, let me turn to the much awaited, Professor Shirin. It's early morning for you there. And after listening to the country's specific experiences on digitization and good governance, as an academic, what are the challenges and the scope you inferred from the presentations of the country experiences? And also you emphasis, I have seen your writings, and you emphasis on the humanitarian aspects of the digitization as well. And in the international development and, in London School, what are the issues you want to highlight from that humanitarian aspects as well? Over to you.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm very much enjoying the panel discussion. So, yeah, I've got a few comments to make, and I think it will also kind of relate to what has been said already. I think one, for me, even the term digitalization, we are here more and more talking about the connection between the technology and the institutions that exist, that have existed for a long time. And connecting that when we have an intervention, it's extremely important, which has just been pointed out already, with the work processes and with the practice of different government organizations. So I think that's extremely important to keep in mind. And the more and more that we have technology which is sophisticated, and today it's the era of the digital identity platforms, and we have complex interoperability issues which come to the fore. And they come to the fore in terms of technical interoperability, but also, as we are saying here, as already been mentioned, it is really a case of trying to interoperate with work processes on the ground, with the long legacy of how different government departments have been working as well, which cannot be changed through any kind of sophisticated technology. So I want to just spend a few minutes picking up on something that Professor Nidhi was saying as well, that from my experience, and I've been working on different types of e-government or e-governance projects in India, in fact, since the late 80s. I just want to reflect a little bit on the issue of decentering governance and on the extremely important efforts which were made right from the time that we are talking about Rajiv Gandhi's decentralization drive. All of that was part of e-governance. So at the time of the efforts to introduce management information systems, for trying to reform the ways in which the Department of Rural Development was administering its large integrated rural development program of those days. Anyway, I studied that as a PhD student. I was in Gujarat. I was going around. One of the things that came out there was, of course, the system was very successful in terms of reporting. The quality of data also for reporting improved. But this was always the kind of one-way upward flow of more accurate data. Not a bad thing, a very important thing for governments to be able to administer programs. But the emphasis of the project was actually more than that. It was to devolve powers to the district authorities so that they could take decisions which were much more relevant to providing assets to rural poor families at the time. Anyway, that was one era. Then we have the era, I think throughout the world, but definitely in India, where it was like early 2000s, we're talking about let's focus on front-end e-services and the kinds of one-stop shops that we have just been talking about. Yes, they were successful and they meant a lot of improved efficiency both for government, changed the lives of citizens. We didn't have to wait for half a day to pay your bills, etc. But I also feel, and some research that we conducted also shows that the effort to use front end in order to reform the back end, which was in fact one of the main ideas there, was to some extent partially successful, but it was the glamour of having the front end, all the service delivery officers sitting in a line, which is great. I'm not criticizing it. But in terms of reforming, some of the things that we were just mentioning also in the Russian context, the difficulties of doing that. Then when we speak about the telecenter movement, and in India, telecenters were also have proliferated late 2000s, and I studied the Akshaya Center in Kerala. And one of the things, again, we found that we were then opening the box of governance services beyond just government. Here we're talking about entrepreneurs who were owning the centers, and we were talking about a new way of thinking about governance and its connection to development, because these centers were always supposed to be much more than just bill payments. They were also meant to provide content. And again, when I studied this over a period of years in Kerala, we found that the successful telecenters, were the ones which aligned very well with local bodies, sometimes informal bodies, but definitely with the village council representation. And this made the telecenters projects acceptable to citizens, but it also meant that the services that were delivered were context specific and therefore relevant. And in Malappuram district, where we did the research, this connected very well to the farming community. And therefore, co-opting the agricultural extension officer into the space where you had the telecenter really showed the beauty of trying to mix and match the physical and the technological aspects of governance, reform, and development. Anyway, and now today when we're talking about e-governance and the ways we understand it, of course, we are talking about a different architecture. And we are talking about, biometric technologies with the Aadhaar system, for example. Something that we were looking at just recently was the ways in which Aadhaar is enabling subsidy dispersal to farmers. And this intervention we were looking at in Andhra Pradesh really highlighted something which Nandan Nilekani in 2016, when we had the opportunity and the honor to meet him just briefly, he said one thing. He said that Aadhaar is only a platform. Now it's up to local government and district authorities to create applications to integrate with the identifiers. So we were really struck by that, and therefore we went to Andhra. We spent a few years, in fact, trying to study the ways in which Aadhaar really comes to the fore when it is connected with the adaptations that have been made by district governments and also by the retail and the ration shops, which need to adapt the point of service device, which is there at the ration shop, and the algorithm, of course, for providing subsidized fertilizer works out the type and the quantity of fertilizer for the farmer, because this is specific on the soil. But the point I'm making is the adaptations which have had to be made at that level in order to make this a system which is of benefit to the citizens and also which is relevant for the people who are supporting the citizens. That's the ration shop, etc. So I guess what I really wanted to show through these cases is, again, to reinforce what has already been said, but to make the point that the more that we have sophisticated technologies, the interoperability issues as a socio-technical phenomenon is really going to make or break the connection between the E, or the digitalization, and improved governance and also improved development in all countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I particularly enjoyed that point of, the decentralization aspects and the importance of the institutions and the level of literacy and the civic vibrancy of the people to take the digitization infrastructure to the next level, especially the point you mentioned about the experience of Akshaya centers in Kerala. And, it has got another dimension when there is an aging population. And in Kerala, when there is demographic transition, that old people are living alone and they want to live authentic, getting the service, public service provisioning, but their children are abroad. So the Akshaya centers and going digital, how it helped that aging population to, to support or to get the public service provisioning, that feedback mechanism, that was also very crucial. And especially you talked about the North Kerala villages in the agriculture sector, how it helped. That point is very well taken. And my takeaway from all the presentations regarding in the first round is about the state capacity and the challenges it poses related to the lack of that in communication person and the importance of having a strong institutions, especially the decentralized local level institutions when we talk about the decentralized finance. So the technology, finance, and the importance of the decentralized institution. So that's a takeaway from the first round of the discussions we had from the country's specific experiences. Now in the second round, we can have a quick look about the forthcoming public policy perspectives. Because where to, we have reached to the third level of infrastructure, from the physical infrastructure and the social infrastructure to the digital infrastructure. And we have attained fruits in terms of human resource management systems, in terms of the investment, in terms of the tax compliance, in terms of finance and technology and the procurement systems. But what are the future public policy initiatives and the regulatory framework in terms of the country-specific initiatives and in terms of the multilateral regulatory frameworks required to, enhance the digitization and the good governance? So that's the focus I would love to have on the second quick round. And now I turn to, Dr. Santosh, and I go by the way the students have introduced you. So I go to Dr. Santosh Misra first to take the perspectives about this. Over to Santosh.
Thank you, Professor Chakrabarti. And I think it was really fascinating to listen to some of the panelists, and getting a context from other countries was really interesting. So in terms of regulations, and I think I would add assessment to the regulation as well, from public policy perspective. And in fact, morning we heard DARPG Secretary Mr. Srinivas talk about some of the initiatives which his department had taken. And one of the key initiatives he mentioned was National E-Governance Service Delivery Assessment. And if you look at it, that kind of, when you start measuring performances improve. I mean, that's the nature of democracy. So the moment somebody brings out a report card, I mean, it has been seen when they had this city rankings, cleanliness, city rankings on cleanliness in India. I mean, now you go to Indore and that whole ranking one is owned up by everyone you meet in Indore. And which is such a heartening thing to see, that just by starting to measure, you have totally brought in a revolution. And I think that's the same thing which DRPG, Department of Administrative Reforms and Public Grievance, is doing. By bringing NESDA, that is National E-Governance Service Delivery Assessment, and ranking the states in their integrated service delivery and integrated technology adoption. In fact, this year, 3 new parameters, which is open government data, use of emerging technology, and citizen participation in policy making. And why I was mentioning this is because this is closely linked to what you said on regulation and policy making. This is one big nudge which is coming from DRPG side, from Government of India side, to various state governments, to district government, city. And this year we also started looking at ranking city portals, for example, because city portals are very crucial in urban setting. They are responsible for a good part of delivery of public services. So by measuring, you are measuring and publishing it, you are encouraging a very, very healthy competition, and the results are to be seen. And this has been happening over the last 3 years of NESDA assessment. On the regulatory front, which you said, obviously there is DPDP Act, which has come into existence, which is Digital Privacy and Data Protection Act, which lists out responsibilities of a data fiduciary, a large processor of data. It also defines what is personally identifiable information, PII information, how that has to be handled, what are the rules of the games, what will be the consequences, and what all are the broad contours which everyone who's using sensitive data has to comply with. So that's one part of regulation which is going to step in, and actually it is going to transform a big way the services are delivered on public side, and also a lot of private businesses as well. So that's one regulation which we see happening. It's already there. I think the rules are yet to be notified, but that's in the offing. The second one, which is on artificial intelligence, and I think there has been a lot of discussions on forums on deep fakes, on unethical use of AI being biased, AI being non-inclusive, non-representative, being a black box. Decisions cannot be appealed against. We don't know how the decisions have been made. So that's another area which is out in the open, and I think a lot of discussions are happening. EU has, of course, brought out an EU AI Act. United States has brought out a presidential order on foundational large language models. Same discussion is happening in the Indian context as well, and I'm sure it is happening in the rest of the BRICS context as well, because it is such. I like what Nidhi said. When you have great power, you have great responsibility, and I think AI is such a powerful technology that you have to, either by a consensus or like by what EU did by an act of parliament, you have to provide safeguards for everyone who's a user and could be affected. And she mentioned when digitization happened, a particular certificate did not get captured, and it caused endless agony to a family. So we have to be very, very conscious of the fact. And of course, there's a huge debate on that front as well, because regulating something which is so fast evolving is a challenge. And also it is potentially a threat to the evolution, because it can be stifling the innovation. So how do you balance the two aspects, ability to use it in a safe and a responsible manner, at the same time also providing enough headroom for the innovations to keep on happening? And I think that's the balance which I think we need to strike. And this is, again, not a problem of India specifically. It's a global problem. Of course, there's a global partnership on AI, which we just had December summit in India. There was a ministerial declaration. And I think, again, the highlights were that we want to use AI, which is inclusive, which is equitable, which promotes public good, and which is accountable. So these are the two regulations on the horizon. I see at least one in the Indian context, and I think globally also the data protection is gaining momentum. AI regulation is another one which is already existing in parts of the world, and India is again contemplating as to what to do. And I think there is a wider consultation with academicians, with industry, with government, with NGOs, with a lot of people has to happen, so that, as I said, a fair balance is achieved between the goals of innovation without getting stifled, at the same time not having to really worry about and allow, because these are really, really powerful forces. They can even impact democracy. So I think it's important to understand that and go forward. Professor
you.
Chakravarti.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Santosh, for that clarity. And, Professor Asha mentioned that, Chinese professor from China, Professor Xian, he's unwell, so he will not be participating in the meeting. Okay, and Dr. Santosh, this also reminds me that your take on that high risk and high efficient system, and also Nidhi pointed out, this also takes me to the monetary policy side. When we talk about the regulations, one is ethical, the other thing is legitimate. So in case of the digitized world or the digital public good, as you mentioned, what is legitimate and what is ethical can be very different. And also it takes me to the crypto world, like it's a high return, high risk currency or high return asset. So if you don't have any regulatory mechanisms, the entrepreneurs, how they do the cross-border transactions, or the youngsters who want to invest in the high return, high risk asset, if there is no regulation, how to go ahead and find out the good coins and the pish coins. So it takes me to the monetary policy front. But of course, in the whole discussion, we have confined our talk to just the governmental and the fiscal side and the regulatory side. But if when we discuss, if we can take that monetary policy, because it's an innovation, as you rightly pointed out. So in the money and finance field, it's an innovation, the digital currency. And if, of course, we have the CBDC now, it is tested in different cities of India, and it's going to be increasingly. So then what will happen to UPI versus CBDC? So these are the new questions that's coming to my mind when we talk about the regulatory mechanisms. And maybe Professor Nidhi can talk to us, and other country experiences also we can listen to when we talk about the regulatory mechanisms, both from the fiscal and the financial side. Over to you, Professor Nidhi.
So thank you, Professor Chakravarti. As I mentioned earlier, I would the tech side has been covered very eloquently by Dr. Mishra when he talked about the regulatory aspect of AI and ML, or even the aspects of data security or deniability. Again, I would approach this from a aware citizen with a public administration lens again, not going too much into the financial specific challenges, but I would like to focus on a little more general public policy challenges, because public policy is not like a machine with multiple levers that you press one lever and everything else moves in a predictable manner, and you have, lo and behold, an outcome which comes out at the other end of it. On the on the contrary, public policy is like a rhizome. You've planted something under the sea, under the soil. You don't know what is happening. Something which has come up, you cut it, but you don't know whether 5, 10, 15, 16, or even 2 days later, something else will pop up, which will create a new problem, which you had not foreseen when you were implementing the solution per se. So from that perspective, and it has, a part of it has also been touched upon by Professor Shireen earlier. So I would like to touch upon just 2 of those public policy challenges which I foresee might arise, and we might, as a public administrator, as a public policy specialist, as a country, we would need to be aware of to take care of these, because this could bring a different kind of challenges in its wake, which are not necessarily technical, but they need to be addressed nonetheless. And there, a point which has already been talked about is decentralization, where in a federal setup, in a country like ours, which has a strongly federal setup, the capacities of even the state governments differ. Forget about the capacity of subnational. So while you have CSCs, while you have all these beautiful stories coming out from different parts of the state where they have done well, I would just also sound that there is a huge divergence even at the state level capacity across India and also in the sub-state level institutional capacity across India in terms of how much digitalization they can do for even basic services. And then again, also how it will integrate across states. So for example, I as a citizen has availed of a particular service or a certificate from, let's say, one state. Is it valid in the other? So I've got, let's say, a driving license or some NOC for a vehicle or something from one state. How does it talk to the other? Do they even accept that digital thing, or do I have to again go back to the paper version and do that? That is one challenge which I see, because all the states need to be brought up to that level where you have a fairly uniform kind of digital service provision across states and at sub-state level, and that they are talking to each other. Going ahead, this is one public policy challenge which I see, where probably the federal government can share its experience in digitalization with the state governments, build capacities there, whether through state training academies or state systems. There are other bodies through which one can reach out. That is one thing. The other thing, and which is more concerning for me, is for a country which prides on its people richness. We keep talking about demographic dividend and all such things. If the digital systems are going to be making a huge number of people redundant, we will need to think of what is to be done with that if the democracy and the state setup that we see now is to continue to strive. Because in every election, everywhere, and employment is a big issue. And young people everywhere are going to be concerned about it. This is one side of the coin. On the other side, interestingly, we are seeing that we need not just tech experts, but domain tech experts. For example, tax tech experts or health tech experts. And similarly, so we as a country need to figure out that you need to retrain a huge, vast segment of your thriving young population and create opportunities for them to learn and grow to be productive and to be able to, contribute to this, huge wave, which is going to only grow bigger. So that we are not leaving people behind, and we are also not misusing or not using the resources which are available to us. So this is another challenge which I see, where we need to seriously rethink as a country as to how we are going to divert this kind of people from this kind of low-based skills to specific high-tech domain-related tech skills, and use them appropriately to make sure that we continue to grow, and it is not either or, but both these goals of public policy are met. So I think I will just stop there and leave the stage open to other participants. Thank you.
Thank you, Nidhi. And that labor market dynamics, I appreciate that point, like how painful this transition can be, and the importance of skilling and reskilling, to avoid that labor market redundancy and the replacement, because the replacement will be very painful. So how we need to look into those labor market issues, thank you so much for highlighting that aspect, because for many segments, this transition won't be that easy. And, I now turn to Professor Alexa to listen to you about the accountability and the transparency issues related to the public policy. Over to you.
Thank you very much. I would like to continue the idea about experts, and we really need the experts who will be open for public, provide the transparency, and at the same time operated by data in decision making. Because to use the data, operate by data, and not to show the public, not to show the people, non-government organization, why you do such a things, or not something opposite. It's very significant because people should to support the decisions, not to opposite. And I think that in Russia we now have a great need to educate the new generation of experts in public administration, students, who will have a possibility to operate data, to collect data, to use a soft for indicative analysis, and who can show the results and to have some possibility to influence the decision making in government bodies. At the moment, unfortunately, we have no such a good system of think tanks who can project the ideas about the result of data analysis to government bodies. So we, in parallel, have the two realities. First reality, decisions of government bodies, and other reality, the think tank, universities, and academia analysis of the processes. And this is the gap should be closed. In the same time, we have a great change in the research of public administration by academics, experts. In last years, over 90% of the articles, research articles, using the data. Interesting that the number of articles which use the data for public governance analysis increased rapidly. 10 years ago, it was less than 50% of articles, but now, for example, our journal, Public Administration Issues, I am the deputy chief editor of this journal. Last time we published mostly exclusively articles with the data. It's impossible to imagine before. So we try to grow the experts who will use the data on the level of academia, on the level of students who will work in governmental bodies, on the level of decision making in governmental bodies and think tanks, which is working collaboratively with governmental bodies. Results of this activity. First of all, more and more in some governmental bodies, decision making are based on data, especially in the situation with in Russia right now. It's connected with security, with Ministry of Defense, with another bodies which connected with the situation in Ukraine. Because for them it's a great need to operate by data and not by some emotions and so on. Less in some other ministries like Ministry of Labor, more in Ministry of Finance, in Ministry of Economics, of course, and so the picture is not homogeneous at the moment. But first of all, I would like to say that we have a real trend that quality and number of experts who can operate the data, use digitalization in decision making, and they cooperation with governmental bodies became more and more strong. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Alexa. That is very important, especially in the times of, geopolitical uncertainties and risk, how much it is important for the governments to have informed decisions based on the data. That point is very well taken, because, if there is data fundamentalism, if there is no data, then the narrative or the emotions or the stories that can, derail the public policy narratives. That point is very well taken. So maybe in the next quick round, I was thinking that, I will take a 1 minute point of view from all of you about what's the role of the BRICS as a forum to get into this question of, going digital or going empirical. But before that, I would love to listen to Dr. Shirin about the public policy perspectives and the regulatory mechanisms which you would love to put on board. Over to you.
Thank you. I have just a few thoughts, a few comments from the last round. I think that as the world has moved towards, software as a service on the cloud, I think we also have to bear in mind, and especially from what I know about the British government right now and the problems that it faces in different government departments, the outsourcing trend is it's one that's not going to go away. And when we're thinking about the ways in which software services and software products are available so much more as a service. Now, what does that mean then for public administration? Yes, it means that you have to have the nature of expertise, I think, is changing the world over, because it's more a question of how, if you're able to buy something which is off the shelf, then customizing it into your government department, whichever level we're talking about, center, state, district, whatever it is. But then, what I'm trying to say is, the nature of this kind of adaptation and fitting it in with the ways in which your department has been working, making sure it's not dysfunctional, actually even scanning the environment for looking at what products are available on the market, whether it's ed tech or whether it's health products or whatever. So I think that is quite an important thing, because it's not so much the expertise that can be harnessed and brought into the department for actually designing, the entire cycle of designing AI and ML tools. It's more to do with the adaptation. And this is a skill, I think, which is going to have to be very, very specific to each department. And the other thing which is related to what Professor Sharma was saying also at the beginning is that, yes, when I think about, the SDGs and the push now towards 2030, and all countries are grappling with how are we going to achieve these targets, these sustainable development goals. Of course, data is there, more and more data is there, and countries are able to mine it and do analysis. But all of that is still outcome. We're looking at outcome measures. I'm not saying that that's not important. That is very revealing. However, it is still, some of the things that we've been talking about today are much more linked to the dynamics of change, institutional processes, how people find relevant certain bits of data and not other data sources. All of this is about a more evaluation and more learning type of assessment. So, and I don't see too much of that when we are coming to the SDGs and the ways in which they are being measured and co-opted into service delivery. And then the other point, the other thought which I had is related to the fast nature of thinking across, when you're talking about regulation, data is needed for normal functioning. Say, for example, if we're thinking about health, now we know that we had COVID, perhaps future crises, pandemics might arise. So the nature of the artifacts that we have and the technology that we have is more and more, the need is for, fast adaptations, not just of data sets. So you know who's vulnerable normally, and now this has to be adapted because there's a crisis. It's not just that, but it's much more to do with linking that to the regulations which govern, for example, humanitarian crisis. I mean, this is a different body, different government institutions are involved. And at the highest level, you have the principles of humanitarian intervention. So that's a vast difference between that and normal governance. So here again, we have the technologies that can provide this interface, definitely. But more than that, it is to do with the human factors, the institutional factors, when we're thinking of this kind of interoperability. Those were some thoughts. They're a bit random, but I hope it makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Shiran. I think I would love to take a round on, continuing these points only, especially against a backdrop of BRICS as a geopolitical bloc. We all countries are together right here. Of course, there is a conspicuous absence of China, South Africa, of course, there. But in the next meeting, as a geopolitical bloc, when we frame this multilateral policies in terms of the non-interference, in terms of mutual benefit, in terms of equality, in terms of the cross-border transactions, in order to ease the ease of doing business? What are the kind of that multilateral cooperation that we need to emphasize? Because here we are unpacking, we as Indian or Russian or a different or a specific nationality, but when we are sitting together in the high table, what is that punchline? What is that thing you look forward to in the next BRICS meeting, and other inputs from this discussion to the next, when we will be on board together, that cut across nations? What is that input for you to the next BRICS table? And let me begin with Dr. Santosh. And thank you for bringing clarity about the regulatory mechanisms country-specific in the earlier round. Now over to you for a multilateral architecture and your inputs into the next BRICS meeting on this topic.
Sure, Professor Chakravarti. I think so. Technology by itself is beyond boundaries. So a solution, a technology, a cryptocurrency, an AI solution which is developed in India or Brazil or China or Russia, it immediately becomes available to everyone else. And as we were discussing in the previous round, there are challenges. There are policy challenges. There are technological challenges associated with each of this. So whether it is cryptocurrencies, whether it is AI, they both are prone to significant potential of, positive as well as a potential to do harm as well. So I think the opportunity for BRICS as a bloc is there to work together, harmonize. I don't want to call it regulation, but harmonize principles of use for these technologies, if you will, and provide and support each other in creating and adopting the digital public infrastructure. So many of them have been already created, for example, in India, and I think some of it can be adapted to other contexts as well, and can be utilized in improving their governance, strengthen their democracies, strengthen their efficiencies in administration. So that's a quick thought from me.
It takes that digital public good to an international public good concept. And thank you so much. Over to you, Professor Niti.
So here I'll again just like to take a step back and take a big picture view where AI, ML or digitization or technology is something which has come from the space of science. And it is very, very useful for us, whether it is quickening our human genome initiative or early detection of cancer or putting the lander on the moon. Science is a little more deterministic, which allows you the freedom to conduct experiments and test and see, and then go ahead. Unlike public policy and governance, which is not only very stochastic, but you can't be openly conducting experiments to test and see if something works or not, because that would also amount to playing with lives. In that context, I think BRICS as a platform would be a very, very important forum to not just share and learn from each other's success stories, but also learn and analyze from each other's not so successful stories, because it allows those natural experiments to be shared with each other in similar kind of, let us say, democratic setups or country setups, and understand that what worked well and what did not do so well. I think that is where a very interesting learning would be, which is otherwise available in science, but not so much in public policy space. But BRICS would allow us to learn from each other's missteps and not fall into that pitfalls ourselves. That I think would be a big contribution of BRICS to understanding and strengthening digitalization in improving governance. Thank you.
Thank you so much for beautifully saying that deterministic and the stochastic. I really enjoyed that. Of course, on one side, everything is 2 + 2 is 4. It's an innovation in the field of science and technology. But, when we look at it as a people mattered policy initiative of the BRICS bloc, in that geopolitical perspective, then it is not exactly the 2 + 2 is 4. It has to be a stochastic, that people mattered initiative should be given emphasis. Even it's an innovation in the science and technology. That point is very well taken. And I move to Professor Alexa for taking his point of view. Over to you.
Thank you. The question, what we can do and what we can propose for BRICS countries for better digitalization. This is a very critical question, and it is it's needed for all of us to contribute this process of digitalization of BRICS. First of all, I propose that we should elaborate to think about the creation of unified banks of data of BRICS countries, because to measure the progress in BRICS countries, we need to use the same indexes and indicators to understand better all our achievements in comparison, and some losses, what we cannot do properly. So unified banks of data, harmonizing of data, like Professor Misha told before, this is very significant task, and it should be done. Second, in BRICS country, we should to think about how to teach students better in public administration and in other areas of social science for better usage of data for analyzing of the government in BRICS countries. We need a new generation of scholars, new generation of students who will do it. Next idea. This is to organize some relation network of think tanks. Actually, we have this network with our symposium. This is part of our network. But by the way, and analytical centers in our countries to work cooperatively in usage of the data, because every country right now in BRICS try to use their own ideas how to create, how to shape the governance based on data. It's better to work cooperatively. And last one, this we should to organize some to work in the direction of data-driven research. For example, it can be some special issue of the journal. I can propose for the colleagues to organize a special issue of the journal Public Administration Issues, dedicated especially for digitalization of governance in BRICS countries. And maybe we can publish this special issue. It can be very interesting, not only for BRICS country, but for and also for another countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor, for highlighting again and again the importance, the significance of harmonization of data. It's not only about the data building, but the importance of the use of data. That also you highlighted by the scholars. So that significance of scholars or the think tanks, so that in the earlier round also you put forward that idea, and Professor Ashapurna is listening and the students are listening, the importance of the research, in building up the multilateral structure, importance of the research other than, getting into the narrative. So that point is very well taken. In the other forums also, we discuss about the importance of the think tanks, especially when we speak about the public financial management reforms and the administrative reforms, the importance of think tanks working close to the ministry or the government, that's very crucial. And the institutions like, IIM, the importance of having a BRICS, a cross-country collaboration, that's very important, and it's very well taken, because the policy research is little different from academic research. So the policy research directly contribute to the public policy outcomes. So that translation of vocabulary, only a think tanks can be very powerful in doing that. And that point of, importance of the think tanks across, BRICS cross-country collaboration of the think tanks, that point is very well taken, along with your points emphasizing, of course, Dr. Santosh point on the harmonization of data. Now, the final word is yours, Dr. Shirin. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. This fascinating discussion. I've taken lots of notes. What can I say? I can say a couple of things. I hope they're useful. First, yeah, I think the idea of a repository is a great one. And this can be done in many different ways. As Professor Nidhi was saying, it's why are things successful? Why are things not working at a point in time? Because it's always going to be cumulative. So I think the dynamic element of not just starting something with a big bang, but continuing, I think this could be a very different model of governance and development and the role of technology, which we not see in the world. And maybe this forum here can be a catalyst for a deeper thinking around that. But I would like to just say one other thing, that I would like to propose that with this agenda, we should never ever be shy of non-technology reforms as well. And I'm just saying this again because of my own experience. I think that I've been looking at primary healthcare in India for a long time. Started off with technology, large MIS kind of systems, and then went on with the mHealth. Well, when we're talking about primary healthcare, I think the one big reform which is made, from my perspective, which has made more of a dent into the lives of village communities, and this is in Karnataka, is really the village health committees. And the village health committees, the VHSNCs in India, have been around for many, many years. I just want to make the point that if we're talking about governance reform, of course, technology is there. We have so much of that, and new scope, because the architecture is more amenable for, as we said, for decentralizing and decentering. However, at the end of the day, these are all political decisions as to how much governments would do this. And therefore, we should never take, I feel that at least, that we should never take the spotlight of the most important thing that we're evaluating is not the technology, but it's the governance, the good governance aspect of that. And also not to just base good governance on what the UN definition has been for decades and decades. This has got to be internalized, and this has got to be contextualized in country. And I think that the BRICS will give us more of an opportunity, if we look inwards into our countries as a whole, to be able to think of each of these parameters. I mean, I've been thinking a lot about the term accountability, what it means. It's always looked upon as hard accountability. We have data, we can enforce what is being done, we can look at workers to see whether targets are being met, but accountability is a social construct. And therefore this can be an opportunity for us to think more creatively about, again, what works and what does not work. In other words, thinking of accountability more in terms of peer-to-peer accountability in whichever sector we're talking about, and also in terms of how accountable is a ministry to its street-level bureaucrats. So this can be an opportunity, and I think that, given the discussion we've had and the energy, we can create something which is different and which will make a difference to the lives of citizens in the BRICS countries. Thank you.
Thank you so much. What a beautiful point to conclude the discussions about the accountability as a social contract, and the reforms in the digitization should be placed well with the non-technical and non-financial reforms. It should not be a watertight compartmentalization. The point is very well taken. And I also enjoyed the point Dr. Shirin highlighted about the political economy. And of course, Dr. Sandosh also highlighted about the political will. That's the utmost component. It's not a technical thing. It's not a technical innovation, but it is going to be the political economy question is going to be the crucial one when we talk about the multilateral or the BRICS as a geopolitical bloc. And I would love to conclude at that level to connect all the people in the cyberspace, in when we deal with the fragmentation in the cyberspace, when we provide this as a mechanism for the fastest and smartest way to develop, not only our country, but across BRICS countries and globally. What we need to consider is that non-technical, non-financial, more people mattered initiatives. And thank you so much. Over to Professor Asha Purna. And thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. And it was lovely meeting all of you in the virtual space. And I would love to crossroads with all of you in future. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you to the esteemed panelists for an extremely insightful discussion. I'm sure there were several key takeaways for all our participants here. We would now be opening the floor for questions from the audience.
Good afternoon, respected panelists. I'm Muskan Goyal from PGP Batch 2325. Thank you so much for such an insightful discussion, and we are honored to have you here at IIM Raipur. My question is that, as ma'am was talking about how technology has been evolving and the young population is concerned about employment opportunities as it eliminates the need of human further. So is there a need for technology to evolve in a way that rather than eliminating humans, it actually tries to incorporate and integrate them into so that it can generate more employment opportunities for them?
Thank you so much. Students over there, you will be handling the question answer round. We have another 15 minutes. So let us take all the questions. Then we will ask the panelists to respond to in the end. We will collect the questions. Maybe another pressing 2-3 questions. Isn't it? Yeah, go ahead with the questions. Yeah. Go ahead with the questions. Yeah.
Yeah, so my second question is that as we talk about India, so we are developing as a nation, but there's a large part of the country that lies in the rural parts of the country. And recently we had an opportunity of rural immersion where we saw that there is requirement of technology to reach those grounds as well. So how can government and policy reforms extend that technology to the rural parts of the country so that that part can also be aligned with the urban population and move ahead? And that's my question.
Thank you. Thank you. Your friends can also ask questions. We will give it to panelists in the end. Go ahead. The floor is open. We'll take 2-3 more questions and then come back to the panelists.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sudhir from PGB Batch 2325. And my question is with Nidhi ma'am. As you told that, like in the digitization, the data speaks a lot. But if we are moving towards the data, like the data privacy problem or the cyber threatening or the problem of the cyber attack may be increased in this. So how we can mitigate these risks?
Thank you so much. Yeah, go ahead. More questions?
Sure. My name is Dr. Pushpendra Punia. I am kind of articulating the concern which was shared by all the panelists, and it's a question and a bit of a suggestion also. As Professor Nidhi Sharma very clearly pointed out, that between technology and public policy, there is always a gap. So that gap can be explained by, politics, as one of the panelists was pointing out, by the manpower training or by other aspects. And I'm taken to a anecdotal kind of a thing which I read some time back, that the faith-based weekly holiday, it was one of the anecdotal evidence, was primarily a post-industrial revolution development. Because when the man realized that machine can work 24 hours, 365 days, then the public policy analyst got the faith-based religious leaders to come up and say, no, 1 week, 1 day of the week has to be given to the Lord and a break has to be taken from work. So there is always been a gap between technological development and public policy. Like right now, we are debating throughout the world work from home. A lot of the younger generation feels that productivity is far higher if we don't have to commute. But the older generation and the leadership, even in the corporate world, is wanting all those persons working from home to come back to office. So again, there is a gap where the stakeholder, difference of opinion on that also, and a decision is to be taken. But as Santosh Mishra pointed out very clearly and articulately, that we have found some typical solutions at some points. And one question which Professor Tapscott here had reached and had asked in the morning, that digital divide is creating kind of new exclusive persons, and we are losing out the inclusiveness. And Santosh Mishra had answered it very clearly, that we can meet the keyboard challenge by making the smartphone cheaper, where people can, reach across to all the governance powers through a smartphone, through the verbal thing rather than the keyboard. So there is again a solution there which is available. So what I'm suggesting also is, and the panelists can take it forward, is that BRICS is a wonderful forum where this kind of experience, where specific solutions have been found to issues which probably transcend the borders, we can use this institutional mechanism to, put them in a form so which can be shared in as a kind of a outcome of this conference, where all the panelists who are domain experts in this area can contribute and give us kind of suggestive solutions which can come out as a kind of a working paper to be developed or something like that. That is my kind of a suggestion to this very learned panel. Thank you so much. What you shared was really, really path-breaking knowledge for, I'm sure, for a number of us sitting in the room.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Absolutely. Yeah, go ahead. We have time for 2 more questions, and then I'll turn to the panelist.
Yeah. Thank you. This is Dr. Saket Bansal from Nagpur. I actually wanted to inquire, when we were talking about data, I actually wanted to inquire about right to privacy and right to data, because in recent developments, it has been found that private accounts and social media accounts were used to understand the human behavior, and those were the things which were used to basically judge whether a person should be given a job or not. Even a comment from 15 years ago is not safe, and which may not be relevant at that time, but it has been highlighted today. And people have lost jobs, people have lost faiths. So is it really mandatory for people to go ahead with any accessibility of the data? The comment which I posted 15 years back, when I was not that mature, or when the people were not instigated by certain comments. So shouldn't that be right to privacy? Because that's my personal opinion. It should not invade my personal space. And many companies are doing that. So can you please, the great panelists, highlight some of the things like that? Thank you so much.
Thank you. So now I'll give the opportunity to the panelists to respond. And if we have time, we'll take another round of questions or wind up and call it a day. Over to the panelist. Dr. Nidhi has a lot of questions, but let me give 1-2 minutes for all the panelists. Let's start from Dr. Santosh. You would love to answer a few concerns. Over to you.
Sure. So I'll I'll take one on unemployment due to technology, and the other one, the last one, on the privacy and right to data. Uh, 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 I think others. Okay, okay, sure. So I think unemployment, every time there is a technology revolution, upheaval, lot of disruption happens. So there will be a short-term confusion, I would say, in the employment sector. But slowly things settle down, and we saw it multiple times when, I mean, Industrial Revolution 1, 2, 3, 4, all of them. So Industrial Revolution 1 broadly was students? Steam, right? So steam made a huge difference. So there was this threat suddenly that, I mean, what manually was possible in 50 days could be done in 2 days, etc. And we saw that we overcome that, and the pace of growth became so overwhelming that actually you needed much more people to come into the employment sector than they were required before the Industrial Revolution 1.0 happened. Industrial Revolution 2.0, that was electricity. Same thing again. I think again people said, oh, what electricity achieved was it could separate the place of energy production from the place of energy consumption, and that was the fundamental shift it brought in the way manufacturing sector operated. And again, the same threat was there. I mean, so I don't know how many of you remember. I mean, none of you would have been born, at least amongst the students. There used to be a system of harkaras. In fact, the whole system of these dark bungalows in India were actually, I mean, now we kind of correlate it with guest houses, but they were not really guest houses. They were dark bungalows. So the dark will literally be carried by a gentleman or running with a spear whole night probably, and take the dark from somewhere to some. So when the telegraph came, then they said, oh, this harkaras will be wiped out, which they were wiped out. And so every time there is a technology transition, there is a set of people, set of jobs, set of skills which become redundant, but always and invariably it has opened floodgates for a new set of skills. So AI coming in, people said, oh, I mean, they will decide everything. But actually, who will rate these AIs? There's a strong need for a skill for, so what Nidhi said, reskilling is required. So there's a strong need for people to do data labeling. You need tons of people, and in fact, to do data cleansing, to do create data which can be used to train AIs. Now there is a talk of making sure that AI is bias free. So you need somebody to rate a particular data set, saying that it is bias free, it has inclusivity index of 0.3 and it has, or 0.9, or it has it is representative of population. So new jobs will come in. So I think while it's natural to be a little fearful, but I think the future is very bright. On the right to privacy and right to data, sir, I think, of course, the companies use it now. US visa is completely contingent upon your social media posts. And the moment you put it out in the public domain, it's no longer your private space.
Yeah.
So you have put it out on Twitter for everybody. You have put it out on Facebook for everybody. Yeah. It's not your private space. So while if you keep it inside to yourself, it's your private space, and somebody sort of gives you that truth serum and says that, okay, spit it out. You like, you are left leaning or the right leaning. So that's invasion of privacy. But if I keep posting on my social media, supporting one ideology or the other, it's definitely not your private opinion. So these two questions, and the third one you wanted me?
Okay, Professor Niti wants to answer that, or yeah, over to Professor Niti. We have now 5 minutes left, and
So
over to
I'll
you.
just also quickly touch upon the government. So here, as he's correctly said, the world is changing. and these changes are here to stay. And these have happened evolutionarily also over millennia and in the life of human beings also as they existed, and will keep on happening. The smart thing to do is therefore not to push back against this tide, but to know what to do so that you can ride over this tide and not be swarmed. In that sense, I was highlighting some of these public policy challenges. And one thing which I think we as public administration or the government of the day can do is pay more attention to our academic syllabi and inputs and whatever, and increase interactions between what is called the triple helix of learning, which is the industry and the academia and the government. Have people talking to each other so that what is needed, whether it is in the industry or in the public policy space. Then you have the academia. So instead of having fossilized syllabus which last long years and take a lot of it to, and the government is aware of it, and therefore you have a lot of these ideas in the new education policy also, and it highlights things like apprenticeships and so many such things. So these are new ways in which you can keep learning very up to date, and you have young people quickly gauging what is needed by either institutions, public institutions, or industry, and you have the academia quickly responding and learning from each other. That is one way. As far as the government efforts are concerned, so it's not just about, if you actually go into far-flung villages. I started my career from Imphal in the Northeast. And when I went to the place where my husband was posted and where my daughter was born, the only radio which you could probably catch then through world space was Radio Ceylon, or Afghanistan. So you would not even get Indian radio signals. Then I am talking 2002-3, right? We've come a long way from there. But it's also about electricity, which the government is focusing on saturating all the villages. It is also about cheaper phones, which we are doing through, industry, institution collaboration. It's about having the network reach. A lot of work is being done by the government there also, so that you have these, network reaching whether it is through universal service obligation of the simple phone providers, or also having governments own LAN and these things reach the villages. So on all those fronts, taking it to the last mile is a lot of work is being done in terms of making digitalization reach the last man there by providing the things which are necessary for getting onboarded to digitalization. The retraining part also, I just touched upon that, and I think he's very correctly answered the social media questions. It is here to stay. We have, as human beings, to learn to adapt, how to deal with it and survive and come out on top. So I think I'll just stop there. There's just one more note, which I would say, I don't know, I think Taleb made this point in his book, Anti-Fragility. Whenever there is this churn for an organism, a few cells are sacrificed so that the organism survives. It's a very morbid kind of a statement, but there are always sacrifices in this churning, whether it was the Industrial Revolution or some such thing. There are some people who will get left behind, and that is the aspect which public policy has to be more sensitive about and take care of through these retraining and other mechanisms, support systems, support, income support and all those things. That is the space where we have to be aware of as public servants, public administration space. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much for highlighting the leave nobody behind. And we have 1 minute and quickly to Alexa and Dr. Shirin. Professor Alexa, go ahead.
Okay, I would like to concentrate about the question about the gap between the public policy and technology, and also to about privacy of the data. So this gap between technology and public policy is in some technical moments consist of some accusation of digitalization in some wrong decisions and in wrong using the data. Such accusation is very often used by the critics of digitalization in public governance. First of all, not the trust in data. Data is collected not properly, and data does not reflect the real situation. Second, when we collect the data, it's no privacy in the data usage, and it's possible that data can be used by some thieves and so on, so on. Next one, the duplication of the data, duplication of the indexes. When twice we speak about the same, but using the different indexes, it's a typical situation in VGI, World Governance Indicators, in 6 groups. 3 groups is interdependent very strongly. Instability in data collection. When we collect the data 2 years in some way, and after this we change the collection of the data, and these changes not allow us to compare the data of different years. And of course, the last one, this is a political pressure on interpretation of data analysis, because politicians would like to interpret the data analysis in their favor. So, but this is a technical issues. I think that in future it's impossible completely solve these technical problems, but we should to solve these problems better and better, to collect and use the data in more and more right way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Alex. I can't agree with you more. Now the final word is yours, Dr. Shirin. Talk to students. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Just in 1 minute, I just want to say, yes, I agree. There will always be winners. There will always be losers. We've had this with all types of infrastructure, electricity, etc. But I leave you with the question of, is this more severe when we are talking about digital, adverse digital incorporation, that term of adverse digital incorporation? And is it the case that today, when we're talking about employment, the world is moving towards more and more online work, gig economy work, and all of this is providing jobs to people, yes, through technology, that's fine, but it also means that there are lots of institutional voids. People do not have protection, they're much more vulnerable, they're dependent on the vagaries of clients in the global north, etc., etc. So I think that here, yes, new opportunities, retraining of people, but there's an even bigger role, I think, of public administration and government to be able to make sure that the divides do not get further reinforced. That's it. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. With that note, we come to an end, that leave nobody behind. We should not keep anybody vulnerable in the process. And that's a beautiful, closing point I take. And over to you, Ashapurna. Thank you so much, IIM, for having me. And thank you, wonderful panelist. It was brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Now, I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of our panel members for their valuable insights on the topic. And I now request Professor Satyasiba Das to please extend the mementos on behalf of IIM Raipur to the panelists for gracing us with their presence in this BRICS conference.
We now request the dignitaries to proceed for lunch, which has been arranged outside the auditorium. We request all the paper presenters, organizing committee, scientific committee, YSI members, and the director to gather outside auditorium post-lunch at 2:30 p.m. for a group photograph. The students are kindly requested to remain seated until the guests leave.